Welcome to Mystical Messages. I am Hillary Harley, your podcast host. I am a soul guide and astrologer. Mystical Messages is your podcast gateway to discover and learn more about the realm beyond the veil, including all things intuitive, metaphysical, and the healing arts. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hillaryharley.com. If you would like to read my monthly forecast, you may find the full written transcript for all astrology episodes on my website. That way, if you hear something and want to re-listen to a forecast or to check a date of a cosmic event, you may find it on the monthly forecast on hillaryharley.com. Today, we are discussing flower essences and ancestral healing work. And I am so delighted to have my very special guest, Anu Dayal-Gulati, join me to understand more about her work in the field of flower essences and ancestral healing work. So welcome, Anu. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Hillary. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
So before we get too far into our conversation, I always like to make sure people know how to reach you. Your website is Heal Your Ancestral Roots, all one word, healyourancestral.roots.com. And your email address is anu, A-N-U .gulati, Gulati 3 @gmail. Is that correct?
That's right.
And we'll go over this at the end with your Facebook and Instagram as well. But I just want to put that out there for people listening or re-listening to this episode. So I'm so excited for this because I've been waiting for your book to come out. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what led you to your healing practice of flower essences and healing your ancestral roots. What first drew you to it?
Well, I think, Hillary, at some point in my life, this was bound to happen. And when it did, it happened in a very, very traumatic way. I had a health problem and there were some complications. So I ended up going into the ER. And I came out, I thought, this is it. It's behind me. I'm going to get back to life as usual. And then one night, out of nowhere, I had to go back into the ER.
Oh, my heavens.
And I remember feeling really frightened and not knowing what was happening and if I was going to be okay. And I did come out, but unbelievably, I had to go in for a third time.
Wow.
And that's when I really started to feel like I'd lost hope. I could tell from the doctors around me that they didn't really know what was happening and if I was really going to be okay. So I just remember this feeling of despair sort of sweeping over me.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a very good friend and she was into alternative healing. And she came to see me in the hospital. And I remember she held my hand and she looked at me and she said, Anu, what is it going to take for you to do something differently? What is it going to take for you to change?
Mm-hmm.
Her words really hit home. I can still feel them even like today.
Mm-hmm.
I literally willed myself out of the hospital. And that's when I started my journey into looking into alternative methods of healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I found this amazing Chinese medicine doctor, and I discovered flower essences. And those two things really changed my life. Like they saved my health and they changed my life. And what I realized is through this is that how important hope is in our lives.
So true.
So fundamental. And I think that's really the turning point because that's what led me to do what I do. because I want people to recognize that you can shift things in your life. You can change things in your life. You can have a much more fulfilling and rewarding life. Like you are never powerless.
No, no. And so often when I have healers or practitioners of in the healing arts on as guests, many of their journeys begin. My journey certainly began with um, a healing crisis. I had chronic sinus infections and went through sinus surgery and the whole thing. It was not as severe or dramatic, certainly, as what you're describing, but the body is the last line of defense. Like, the universe keeps sending us messages. Something needs to shift, something needs to change. And if you're not paying attention, we're going to, zing you with something in your physical body so that you do pay attention. So, well, I'm thrilled that you have embarked on this journey. Why, in particular, flower essences? And did they dovetail and lead you to the healing of the ancestral roots? Are they, first one and then the other? How did that work for you?
Yes, I think it definitely happened sequentially the way you're saying, because I fell in love with flower essences when I discovered how powerful they were. I used to go to work and I used to pass this little store on Main Street every day to and from work. And one day I went inside, and at the back of the store, they had these little bottles. And I remember asking the woman in the store, like, what are these and how do they work? And she said to me, well, in order for you to understand this, let me just ask you, how are you feeling? And at that moment, it struck me like no one had really asked me how I was feeling. I had moved from Washington, D.C. to Chicago. I was really upset about the move. I'd lost my support structure. I'd lost my friends. I'd lost a job I loved. And I was angry. I was like bitter. I was resentful. But I had to keep functioning, so I have the lid on my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
When I started taking the flower essences, though, I started to notice the shift. I became calmer. I became less angry. I was able to let go of these feelings of bitterness. And that's when I started to become a huge fan. They really shifted my life. And, I feel that taking flower essences is really drinking the nectar of possibility for your life. That's what they really are. They give you
That
hope.
is
They
beautiful.
make things possible. Yeah.
The nectar of possibility. Oh my goodness. That is, I'm a writer by trade, and that's poetry.
They
Wow.
really are, Hillary. They create shifts in an amazing way and
Mm,
very subtle, very gently.
right, right, right. Yeah, I know when I go away from, I think I shared with you before we started this podcast that I take flower essences from Green Hope Farm up in New Hampshire. And I know when I go away for vacation and I don't take my flower essences, I feel like something is slightly off, like I'm on vacation or but I'm having a good time, I think. But there's something that's not quite the same. So I need to figure out a way to bring some of them with me. But yes, they are very subtle but they're very empowering. And that is a great way to say it, the nectar of possibility.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about why you wrote this book. Was it part of the journey as you were taking the flower essences? You realized there was work to do underneath. Did the flower essences open that up for you?
So when I actually started practicing and seeing clients, I was just a, a flower essence practitioner. So my focus was very much on just emotional healing. But as I started to work with clients, I started to notice that there were patterns that were appearing in their life. So, just a very simple example. A woman came to me and she said, I want to improve my relationship with my daughter. Her daughter had graduated, moved to the West Coast, and the relationship wasn't what she wanted. So she said, I really want to improve that.
Mm-hmm.
As we were talking, as we worked, turns out that she actually wasn't on speaking terms with her own mother. So,
Oh,
this is so simple to see, but you see the pattern across generations. And I started to see patterns in my own life where my mother, my sister, and I, all of us were in three different cities. We hadn't grown up in those cities. We hadn't gone to school, college, work there, and it didn't feel like we belonged. We didn't really fit in. So I was like, well, I don't understand, what is this? And that's what led me to start looking at, why are we seeing these patterns? And that was the sort of the doorway into ancestral healing work. And that's why I started. And
okay.
so I would go for these, I trained for 2 years, and I would go on the weekend, come back, and I would just write and write and write and write. I didn't know what I was writing, but it was my way of perhaps processing.
Oh, yeah.
And as I started writing, like all of these pieces that I've been struggling with ever since I moved into the US, they started to, like gears turning, everything started to come together. And I felt like I finally understood like a framework and the language to sort of put these parts together into one sort of coherent whole.
Right, right. So, how long ago was it that you started with the flower essence journey?
I think, I mean, I started with them at least 20 years ago, at
Mm,
least.
okay. And you
Um,
started seeing clients.
I started seeing clients definitely like over a decade ago, maybe 12, 13 years.
Hmm. And so out of that work came this, it's like it's a science study, really, observation and bearing witness to these patterns. It's really remarkable to see in your clients cause and effect in action for sure.
Hillary, I want to say this because you said you might have younger listeners. I cannot tell you how ashamed I was of doing, this alternative healing work. I was an economist, I was in academia, I was in finance. It's a very rational world.
To say
And
the least.
it's like as far out as my husband could put up with. It was so far out. Or even for me, I was like, it was a stretch for me
Right,
each time, like
right.
way my comfort zone. But I think what I feel like looking back, and this is where the universe lays the crumbs for you to come home.
Hmm.
It's when I, as an economist, as a researcher, you're looking at a problem, you're looking at the pattern, and then you're looking for answers. So the seeds of what I was going to do was
Yeah.
being laid way before.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
Because now when I'm listening to a client, I'm listening, to what they're saying, but I'm also listening in between the lines to what are they not saying? Where are the patterns showing up? The emotions, the transgenerational patterns. And so being a researcher, you're always looking to get to the root of why is this happening? And so it trained me into this way of thinking. And that's kind of how I look at it and how I think about it. And I think that's kind of key in terms of helping me, come up with the solution, which is like the flower essences, the ancestral work.
Oh,
But
for
being an
sure.
economist trained me, even though I never had any reason to believe like that was why I was doing what I was doing.
No, I think that's incredibly important for you to say, for anyone listening to hear and absorb, because often we think one does not have to do with the other things that we're experiencing or working at, but they are a training ground. And I've certainly found that in my own experience. What I was doing in, I call it my other life, which was my 20s and my 30s, prepared me for what I am doing now. And so I really appreciate that you were saying that. So what are your ancestral roots? I mean, your book is called Heal Your Ancestral Roots. What are typically, I mean, how do we think about that? Because, it goes back millennia. I watch Henry Louis Gates talking on PBS about finding your roots. And this is very much a topic people are interested in now, especially the younger generation. They are curious about their origins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In a lot of Eastern traditions and even Native American traditions, your roots are not just your parents and grandparents, but includes those who came up to 7 generations before. So when
Okay.
you think about it, it's like 254 mothers and fathers who need to have been born and existed for you to be here today.
Wow. Wow. That's some context.
That shows you, you're part of something much bigger. And so part of the reason to honor your ancestral roots in many of these traditions is because there is a recognition that your ancestors impact your life.
Mm-hmm.
They can act as a ceiling on your life, and they limit your life in some way. And
Mm-hmm.
so the question is, why does this happen? And it happens because there is something unresolved in the lineage before you. With 254 chapters, yeah, there is. And so there's something unresolved in the lineage. And the only way healing happens is the descendants, those who are living, can make changes, because we also impact 7 generations to come through our actions. So when we take on the responsibility of healing what is unresolved and what is showing up as this block or challenge in our life, we don't only heal ourselves, we also heal those who came before us, and we heal those who come after us. And really, in
That's
some way, we, heal the world, right? The world
yeah.
around us.
Yes. So you're speaking that, so that's remarkable. And each of us who are living and breathing and walking on the earth serve as a change agent and an awakener, a healer, and a pivot point, like a gateway for healing all those who are to come. And that is really remarkable to keep in mind, that we have such power. We think often, oh, we can't make a difference, but we're really making a huge difference each day.
That
So,
is true.
yeah. And so there's a phrase that's fairly popular right now, generational trauma. Um, are you speaking to that a bit, or is that something different entirely?
So the generational trauma that happens, any trauma is like an unprocessed story. It was, unprocessed perhaps in the generation before. And, it's understandable. It's when the body is holding it, the mind is holding it, the subconscious mind is holding it.
Mm-hmm.
The conscious mind cannot process it. It's so enormous what happened. But it gets passed down. And there's so many tools that people are talking about now, like mindfulness, meditation, et cetera, et cetera. And those are in some ways to like allow the conscious mind to take over and bring up whatever was in the subconscious and let it process.
Okay.
But in some ways, family constellation therapy is also one way of addressing trauma, but I'm not a trained therapist. I'm not a trained scientist. So I use like flower essences and ancestral work, like through altars and prayers for the ancestors, which is what a lot of these traditions did.
Mm-hmm.
Used those to kind of heal this ancestral trauma, to bring peace to the ancestral realm. And that in some ways makes it palatable. And palatable in the sense like it makes it possible to deal with it.
Right. Right. No, that's a very
tools that they used for so many, thousands of years.
yes. And we always think in our modern world that we know best because it's a new way, and we relegate, certainly in the field of astrology, oh, that's, ancestral uh woo woo, and we're not going to do it. But really, there is a rhyme, and very much a sound rhyme and reason for why we do certain rituals and work in that regard. My guest is Anu Dayal-Gulati, and her book is Heal Your Ancestral Roots. So we are talking about family constellation work. So when you say family constellation work, is that one and the same as healing your ancestral roots?
So family constellation work is a particular form of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's developed by Bert Hellinger, who was a German missionary, and he lived in South Africa with the Zulus. And this came out of him seeing the work they were doing with the ancestors. And then he trained in psychotherapy and brought this version. The idea is that, family is this energy field, and healing can happen even when the family members are not present. They call it therapy, but it's not strictly therapy. It's more energy work.
Okay.
And so someone who is struggling with an issue goes for a family constellation therapy session. And what happens is that there's a slice of history that becomes available to you to see, your family history. And the context in which you see your family history, it allows you to shift that. Because, Hillary, healing at the end of the day, we cannot do it intellectually. We can say, my father was this way, my mother was this way because XYZ happened.
Right.
Or if we even choose to look at the backstory. But ultimately, the shift has to happen at the level of the heart.
Right.
And family constellation therapy allows that, window and softening of the heart to happen.
Mm-hmm. So that the process, the integration can come to the surface and can be worked through.
Yes, yes. And flower essences then actually support that integration. Even if you don't do family constellation therapy, if you can see the pattern and understand intellectually this is what is happening, then the flower essences, because they work at the level of the heart and emotion, allow some of the release process to start.
So if somebody wanted to work with you, you're available in person, but you do individual and family sessions, or individual one-on-one?
I just work at the level of the individual, because an individual has more power than they think they do.
That's so true. And so could they work with you via Zoom if they were out of state?
Yes. Actually, can I share a story?
Of course.
With a client, Hillary? There was this woman, lovely woman. She called me from Canada, and she was in her early 50s. She had this family that she was really proud of. And she called because she was very anxious and upset about her son. He had just quit his job. And she realized that she was the primary breadwinner in her family. Her two daughters were the primary breadwinners in their family. And so was her sister. And so when her son quit his job, she was really upset because she recognized, wow, this is a family pattern.
Yep.
As we started talking, she realized that this pattern extended before her. Her mother and her maternal grandmother were all
Wow.
primary breadwinners.
That's so unusual
Yes,
for the older generation in particular.
it sounds like there were a lot of, I'm giving you the broad brushstrokes, but there was other stuff too. And
Right.
what really was the case was the men were not carrying their weight in the relationship, because
Right.
being the breadwinner is not, I mean, a lot of women now are the main breadwinners, but it was just that the man was not carrying his weight in the relationship as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what she recognized is that she was carrying a lot of feelings of shame, of blame, of anger. And so she started this practice of honoring her ancestors and also releasing those emotions with the help of flower essences.
Mm-hmm.
And as she worked through this, she stopped trying to fix her son. She started to have more compassion for her family, for what had her father gone through, the grandfather. There was trauma
Mm-hmm.
that happened in that family. And she started to have much more compassion, even for her sons in law, her brother in law. It was just shifting. And
Mm-hmm.
one day, when she was in a, calmer, peaceful place, her son called her and he said, Mom, I just want to let you know I've gone back to work. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm never going to do this again. And, you know, she was thrilled. Don't get me wrong. I was thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
When I heard the words, I don't know what came over me. I'm never going to do this again. I realized like the family energy had shifted.
Right. Right.
The
Right.
pattern had changed. And that's how amazing the work can be when someone takes it on, when someone is the healer in their family.
Right. Right. No, it's so true. Um, to be, and it's an honor, really. You don't even think of it as an act that you're doing. It's so automatic that you just take it on because it's like tag, you're it. You're going to do this work for the family. Um,
And
thank you
I
for
want
sharing that.
and one of the things I want to add, Hillary, that some people feel like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why me. But actually, it is really sacred work. It is
Yes,
really sacred work.
it is incredible. Yes, thank you for saying that because it is really, you can't put a price tag on it. And in the world we live in, we're so outcomes and results driven and productivity. But this is the kind of work that you literally cannot put a price tag on. And it is saving so much angst and all the emotions, and opening to all the joy and the possibility, as you said.
Yeah.
So if you could just describe the difference for anybody that does not understand the difference between aromatherapy and flower essences.
Yeah. So aromatherapy or essential oils is through a steam distillation process, through the stem, flowers, you get roots like vetiver, you get the essential oil. Flower essences really are just the energetic property of the flower. And it comes from the fact that, thousands of years ago, dew was considered very sacred, and had a lot of healing properties. But
Wow.
it's really difficult to collect enough dew. And so Dr. Bach, this a British surgeon in the 1930s, he found a way to recreate the healing property of dew and to stabilize it so that people could use it. So these are really like infusions of wildflowers in spring water and, preserved with brandy. That's really what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's another difference with essential oils in that researchers at the University of Glasgow, for instance, discovered that there are four primary emotions: fear, anger, sadness, and joy. And a lot of times we're in, just three of those four. But what flower essences do is that they take, and this is what Dr. Bach did, he took those primary emotions and he broke them up into their nuances. So there's several different kinds of fear. And the flower essences are very specific. They are very nuanced. That's why they can work at that subtle level and create shifts.
That's a very, very helpful description. Aromatherapy is oil that you mostly use externally too, versus the flower essences are internally taken.
Yes. You have to take you have to take a minimum of 4 drops 4 times a day. So
Okay.
most people take them once before you wake, once when you wake up, once before bed, and twice in between.
That's helpful to know. I did not know that as I take mine. So I just want to talk about what is the greatest misconception of what you do?
I think when I say I practice flower essences, a lot of people think I'm an aromatherapist and these are essential oils, but no, these are taken internally. The other question is, how long do you need to take them? And I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Flower essences can also work very quickly. So if you're going for an audition or, going to the theme park and you're afraid of roller coasters, you can take something. It'll work pretty quickly. But if you have something longer or, much more deep rooted, it takes time. Because they're working at the emotional level, and emotions are like onions, you peel away the outermost layer and you get the strength to go inside. So it just depends on how long you want to journey.
That's very helpful to understand. And what is your most favorite part of your work that you do?
Oh my God, Hillary, my most favorite part is to watch people shift, see them change, and sometimes people will call me from far away and say something has shifted, and I may not hear from them for a while, and all of a sudden they'll call and say, I just wanted to let you know.
Oh.
I'm like, that to me is the most important part of what I do. Like, it's the most rewarding part of what I do.
Right.
Just to know that someone's life has shifted.
You're truly beautiful soul, Anu. My guest is Anu Dayal-Gulati, energy practitioner and flower essence transformational coach. Working also with constellation therapy. Her book is Heal Your Ancestral Roots, just out. So are there any special tools that you would recommend? I know there's a download that you can get on your website. Just to remind people, your website is healyourancestralroots.com. Is there any, tool that you can recommend or talk about?
So in the download that you can get from my website, I offer a list of the 10 most powerful essences that can shift your relationships. Because at the end of the day, it's the relationships that affect the quality of your life. And so this is a list of essences that you can take. It is a starting point if you're looking at essences for the first time. It tells you, how they're created, how they work, how to take them, how to create your own customized bottle, how many you can combine, where you can buy them, what you can do. So It's,
That's
it
very
has
thorough.
a lot of information to start with for
Very
anyone
thorough. Yeah.
unfamiliar.
So that's a download anybody can obtain for free on your website to just begin the journey to explore how to heal your relationships. And I should say, especially as an astrologer, people often come to me, how do I heal, or how do I attract my life partner? And it's about healing and connecting to your relationship with yourself. And that's its own journey. But as you shift your relationship to your own being and soul, and do that work, then it opens the floodgates for healing and attracting the kinds of relationships that are joyful for each of us.
Maybe
So,
can I just add to what you said? Because I think what you said is so, so fundamental. Because at some point, we are taught to disconnect from ourselves, and we happen to do that, and we get the message that, our emotions are not really that important. And I mean, being an economist, being in finance, the message has always been we are rational beings and we have emotions. But if we flipped it and recognize that we are emotional beings who rationalize, so all emotions, the negative emotions especially, really are an invitation to go inside and to reconnect with yourself. The positive emotions come from having connected with ourselves.
that is very well said. Thank you for closing that loop and filling it in the details so much more, because that really explains so much. We are souls, we are spirits having an earthly experience.
Yeah.
And we're taught the inverse of that. And I think it was Einstein. I love his quotations. And he said, the imagination is the gift and the intellect is the instrument. And man, each of us has reversed that because we've been trained to minimize the imagination, which is really the soul guidance, the GPS for the intuitive soul body, and rely strictly on our intellect. So thank you for emphasizing that, Anu. That was beautifully said. So we're nearly at the end of our time together, which I knew would fly, and I could spend hours and hours with you. My last question I always ask for guests is, if you could change the world for better in some way, how would you change it?
I think that's what I would do. I would tell people that, your emotions are so important. They are the compass that takes you home to yourself, like you said. And so listen to them. And I think if people journal, like it's the most valuable way to shift your emotions, the cheapest and one of the most effective ways. It costs next to nothing to write every day. And I think even if kids are taught to write to like their future self, their higher self, a higher power, instead of just dear diary, it really kind of changes the energy of journaling.
That's so true. Yeah, I just want to add, when I was embarking on my journey, I had a friend from out of town that I hadn't seen in years come to visit, and she took me into a bookstore and she bought me The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And, here I am, like I was trained in journalism, trained writer. Like, yeah. I do my writing. And she was like, no, just read this. And I let it sit on the shelf for a long time. And finally, I was going through my sinus infections, my chronic sinus infections, and I picked up The Artist's Way. And it was like the doors blew open, because I started her morning pages that she recommends, and I still do them. It really is a way to reconnect to yourself every day. And even if you don't do them every day, just as a tool that's available to have nearby. And it costs absolutely nothing.
And if you're looking for your ancestral stories, they make those appearance on those pages because
I
did the artist way, and I was journaling every day for a while, and I noticed that things come up, and it you can rewrite your ancestral stories through that process as well. It shifts things.
It's very true. I mean, I so appreciate this conversation because I think back to very briefly my own story and my two grandmothers. One was a budding astrologer, but it was before anything, that was certainly not accepted. And she's the one that introduced me to astrology, but she didn't have the means to practice it. And then my other grandmother was a writer and she stopped. For a lot of different reasons, she stopped. And so you're making me think I'm carrying the torch for both of them. And so it's been such an honor to interview you and have a conversation with you today, Anu. My guest is the really extraordinary Anu Dayal-Gulati. Her book is Heal Your Ancestral Roots. Her website is also healyorancestralroots.com. If you want to reach out to her, she is available via her website, also Facebook and Instagram, healyorancestralroots.com. So that brings us to the end of our time with Anu on Mystical Messages today. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hillaryharley.com. If you would like to read my monthly forecast to check the dates of planetary events and cycles, you may find the full transcript for all astrology episodes on my website. Thank you for listening today. Please join me again in 2 weeks when I will bring you the forecast for the month ahead. I wish you many blessings as you journey forward.